matter or to that which is enjoyed. So we're the imitation Purusha. But then there's the Parama Purusha. There's Krishna. And he's Apurusha. He's infallible. Infallible. You know the meaning, fallible, infallible. We are Krishna. One of the Krishna's names is Ajita, and living entities are Jita. We are subject to become fallen. We're marginal. We might regain the position of becoming liberated souls, but in the present we're Jita, and then there's Krishna, who never becomes subject to the material energy. In fact, he's the controller of the material energy. He never becomes subject to it. He's the controller of it. He's Ajita. He's infallible. He cannot fall. Many of you know this nice verse from Padma Purana about the holy name. Nama Chintamani Krishnas Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Shuddho Nitya Mukto, both of those. Purna Shuddho, always pure. Nitya Mukto, always liberated. And you become attached to that which is always liberated, and you become liberated just by attachment to the always liberated. That's bhakti. Okay, so to know that which is ajita, that which is beyond the senses capacity to know. What's the name of Krishna? It's in the Bhagavatam. The name of Krishna, where he who is beyond the senses. There's a name for Krishna. Adhoksaja. Right? Adhoksaja. Aksaja means eyes. Adhoksaja means beyond the range of sense perception. That's Krishna. Adhoksaja. So he's knowable. That which is beyond the range of sense perception is knowable by descending knowledge, not by the other kind, not by the senses, not by the process of reason. Those are the first two. Jiva Goswami explains even the second one is dependent upon the first one. To reason something, you have to see something and then infer by logic, this indicates that. I hope you don't mind. You're okay. Okay. Have you heard the term nyaya? Logic. One of the 6 atheistic renderings, there's 6 of them. One of them that takes the Vedas and eliminates Krishna. One of them is nyaya. Nyaya means logic. And in the nyaya system, here's the classic. It's detailed, I won't, so. By inference, the classic is, there's 4 parts. In Western philosophy, it's called the syllogism. Anyone that's taken a philosophy course in college knows what a syllogism is. Have you taken a philosophy course? Didn't hear syllogism? It's classic. The syllogism, the classic syllogism. Did you take a philosophy course? Yeah. Do you remember syllogism? Here's the syllogism. 3 parts. There's the statement, all men are mortal. Part 2, Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is immortal. And that there's technical terms that make up the Western elements of logic. It's called the syllogism. And then there's the Vedic one, there's more steps. So in that's nyaya. So that the classic from nyaya is reasonable, but it's also fallible. And there's fire on the mountain. That's first starts with some statement. And then there's some like universal truth. Where there's smoke, there's fire. That's the second step in Nyaya. Then there's smoke on the mountain, therefore there's fire on the mountain. 4 steps instead of 3 steps. But then it could be something else. It could be a cloud, not smoke. Your perception may be wrong. Or maybe on the other side of the mountain, this is, the refutation of Nyaya. On the other side of the mountain, there could have been a fire, and then a downpour of rain for some time, then a bunch of smoke, and the wind blew the smoke on this side, and therefore there's no fire on the mountain. The fire's gone. There could be other explanations other than the logical one based on that process. And so Jiva Goswami explains, even with logic or nyaya or inference, you infer something from something. It's dependent upon sense perception. Therefore, the third one is, for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, it's right in the Bhagavatam. It's using the second one. Neti neti. That's the analysis part. It's used. Mother Jasoda used logic and reason. For example, when she came back to the place when she went to the stove where the milk was boiling, because she was feeding Krishna because he wanted to be fed, she went to the stove, and when she came back, there was a butter pot that she was using for churning, and it was broken, and there was a rock next to the butter pot, and the butter, the yogurt that was being churned into butter had leaked all over the floor or the ground. So she used logic. Krishna must have done this. She didn't see Krishna do it. She just inferred from the evidence. But she was still so then anyway, there's other examples. There's logic and reason that we use in devotional service. It's not final, it's not conclusive. We don't rely upon, it's not the ultimate authority that we rely upon Shabda. But that which reasonably brings the conclusion that Krishna is supreme, it's a nectar devotion. We can accept that. Krishna is supreme. And if not, we don't accept it. The logic that may lead to Krishna is not supreme, we don't accept it. Very simple. But we may utilize what's the best way to serve Krishna in this circumstance, and so we make some effort, and it may not be the best way to serve Krishna, so we withdraw it like that. We use the reasoning process all the time, but it's not our ultimate authority. Here, Prahlad is advocating the neti-neti process. Then if you read carefully in Tattva Sandarbha, specifically in Jiva Goswami's commentary on his own book, he wrote Tattva Sandarbha, and then he wrote a commentary on Tattva Sandarbha called Sarva Sambadani. And then in the commentary he writes there's 10. And one of them is inference, negative inference. I forget what the Sanskrit term is. And here's the example in Nyaya of negative inference. There's some name, somebody. Vishnudas says, Vishnudas, who's chubby, says, I do not eat during the day. So negative inference is he must eat at night. It's inference, but it's negative. It's still, so it's under an inference. It's still, from our perspective, it's just a detail. It's a different type of inference. It's negative inference, which is this, neti-neti. You with me? Negative inference. Here's how Prabhupada explained. I mean, it's in the purport, but in a class, he would ask, if you ask, maybe some of you have the opportunity to give classes to college or high school students that come here from time to time. Or you may speak to a group of children from time to time, maybe sometime in your devotional service. So it's very practical. I've done this with not so much high school kids, kind of maybe uncomfortable being put on the spot, but little kids like it. So you ask, okay, who's the most intelligent student amongst all of you? And everybody looks at the most, everyone knows who's the most. Okay, would you mind being, answering some questions? No, that's okay. Sometimes they're shy. So, depending upon the circumstance, you could say stand up, or just, where you are. Could you point to your arm? Can you point to your head? Can you point to your elbow? Can you point to your foot? Etc. Then can you point to yourself? And sometimes they go like this. That's myself. Then it's to indicate, even by our language, we say my, and then there's an object, the possessor of the object, and then there's the object. Like you say, my shirt, or my socks, or my shoes, and then there's you. You're not the shoes. You're not the shirt. You're not the socks. You're the possessor. And then there's the object. So it's distinguishing object from the possessor of the object, the conscious self from the coverings of the conscious self by the neti-neti process. It's useful. Prahlad is encouraging his friends in school to consider, like Prabhupada would sometimes do with his disciples, or we may sometimes do when we're explaining. It's a very, very simple point. And even when someone will go, okay, the body is different than the possessor of the body, we still identify with the body, like default, because we're so accustomed to it. We're ruled by false ego. What does false ego mean? False ego doesn't just mean like somebody's this macho person that walks around with a swagger and says, I'm a dude. I'm an important person. That's our vernacular. Someone's got a big false ego. But just reduce it to definition, and false ego is a false sense of self. There's aham, that's I am, and there's ahamkara or ahankara, a false sense of self. And that false sense of self, or ahankara, it appears, as we've been hearing from these previous purports, it appears even before the soul gets a body. Before we even do anything, before we even get a body to do anything, we're covered with false ego. Good luck getting out of false ego. How do you get out of false ego? Well, you have to have a true sense of self. So this neti-neti process is by analysis, but its strength is weak. It's something more than nothing. Having a spiritual conception for a devotee, to go to the goal, you have to have Sambandha Gyan before you do the rest of it. And generally, we say yes to Sambandha Gyan and we carry on as if we didn't say yes, just because we're conditioned. So it's a gradual process by the potency of bhakti, according to something I very much like in Kapila Dev's discussion with Devahuti. several times as he's explaining Sankhya philosophy, because this is Sankhya philosophy. As he's explaining Sankhya philosophy, she raises a doubt, which is not her, it's us. Is it really possible to overcome, to become free from attachments to the bodily conception? She, without the details, she asks it 3 times that I can specifically recall, and one time she goes like, I'm paraphrasing, I got it. I got it. I know the philosophy. The soul is different than matter. But they're so interwoven, they're so inextricably involved. There may be a sense of detachment that comes from this analysis process. And then, with that detachment, then you can sail along with a spiritual conception. But they're so inextricably involved. And very soon thereafter, that detachment mood, you're caught up again in matters. It's everywhere. Think about it. Any direction you look, there's matter. We're in the sea of matter, saying, I'm spirit soul. We're so implicated, and for millions of lifetimes, not just, this lifetime, millions. Moment after moment after moment, and it's piled up, this tendency, the residual tendency, so strong. Is it really possible? Good question. And we know the answer. Well, he says, yes, it's possible by the power of bhakti, not just by the power of neti neti. Neti neti is to help us enter with a spiritual conception into the process of bhakti. Many of you are familiar with the section of Nectar Devotion where Prabhupada explains in his summary study, Nectar Devotion, that knowledge may help one get a foothold, but it's not the essence of bhakti. It helps us get into bhakti properly performed, but it's really bhakti. Because bhakti, Kapila Dev describes, it's so powerful. It can dissolve false ego. You can't dissolve false ego by this method. You can get an idea of what we're not. Negative inference, that's the English translation of that, one of the 10 negative, you can infer something in a negative way. Vishnu Das must eat at night. But realization is beyond negative inference or positive inference. It's a gift of bhakti. What's the verse from? One of the verses from the Bhagavatam, very essential verse, Canto 1, Chapter 2, where knowledge causelessly comes for one who engages in devotional service. Vasudevi Bhagavati. Anyone know the verse? Bhakti Yoga Prayojataha. Janiyati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha. Jnanam Cha. Yad Ahaitakam. Ahaitakam means causeless. Causelessly knowledge, Jnanam, and Vairagya, detachment. They're byproducts of Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga, devotional service unto Vasudeva, Krishna. Realization, not just theoretical, realization beyond the neti neti. Realization. So neti neti is here just as in chapter 2 Bhagavad Gita, and chapter 7 Bhagavad Gita, and chapter 13 Bhagavad Gita. Sankhya is there. It's there in the process given by, as we heard yesterday, Devahuti Putra Kapila. But when he's giving Sankhya, it's not just theoretical. Where's it headed towards? Devotional service. Unmixed devotional service. And what's that unmixed? no more gyan. I mean, it doesn't mean you're ignorant. It means trying to understand transcendental reality through a speculative method. Here it's advocating the process of analysis to get one to the position of bhakti. And then it's nice, just add this, and I think I'll end for questions. Going back to 2 verses ago, this is text 23, verse 21 has that very nice metaphor, which means, when we read the Bhagavatam, the verses are connected. We speak on one verse, but it's actually, it's a flow. This act flow this way. It's a flow that starts with a certain premise and then expands and expands, and it's part of a conversation. Just like when we're discussing something with someone, Prahlad is explaining he's a teacher, so this is connected to that, connected to that, connected to that. Same as in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is making a certain point and then embellishes the point. So, first line of the purport, Svarnam. Svarnam means gold. Yata is like or as. Like this, so that. Little Sanskrit. Yata tata. When you see that, this is the known, and then there's the unknown. If you remember from Sunday, there's the subject, and there's the predicate, and the predicate is unknown. Something that's known, the Vipra is a learned man. The Vipra is known, that his erudition is not known. Subject, predicate. So here, yata tata. So what's known is gold for those who are expert geologists. They know, I don't know how they know because I'm not, but they know where gold is and how to analyze a rock, that within the rock there's gold. So Prabhupada is giving a hint, I don't know the detail, nitric acid applied to the rock, and somehow whatever the geological reaction of gold and nitric acid, it indicates, aha, there's gold. Similarly, someone that's expert, so tata, yata, tata, someone that's expert in transcendental knowledge, that is, they received knowledge from a proper source. That's what this third kind of evidence is. Shabda Praman, Aparusheya Shabda. They've heard from a transcendental source, from Krishna or from one who has heard from Krishna, because that's a transcendental source. Then it's possible by that knowledge, like a geologist, yata tata, the expert person can function theoretically, then apply the theoretical knowledge, and they're not this body, they're not the stone covering the gold, they're the gold. And then they can carry out their life. Exactly. When you read carefully third canto Bhagavatam, when Kapila Dev finishes this whole elaborate, mind-spinning analysis of the details of the 24 elements. I mean, here was just like a little simple one. In detail. And then at the end of that detail, that's chapter 26 of Canto 3. He ends the chapter, concludes the chapter saying, the purpose of all of this analysis is to have a spiritual conception that then is applied to the process of meditation upon the Supreme Soul. And then that meditation upon the Supreme Soul is to assist one coming to the position of serving the Supreme Soul with a spiritual conception. That's where it's headed. Now these are people, this is a Satya Yuga process where Sankhya philosophy is intrinsic to the process of meditation, and then the process of meditation is intrinsic to getting to the position of properly engaging in devotional service. And then he describes the next chapter, 27, Canto 3, how people in Satya Yuga who are doing meditation can practically live their lives. And he speaks of householders, not, sannyasis only, or brahmacharis and sannyasis only. It's Satya Yuga folks who are doing meditation and living their lives in a practical way. It's not all they do is meditation. If they're householders, they do other things. So it describes how, practically speaking, how to live your life. It's very valuable instruction. Very valuable. But so the sadhana still must be there. The sambandha gyan must be there. The Sankhya philosophy must be there. And then leading one into the house of bhakti, pure devotional service. Clearly that's his message. Same program going on here. This is another age where it's actually such a yuga. It's another audience. It's boys who, they haven't heard anything transcendental. So the neti process is helpful. Just to give them a clue by using a faculty they're quite familiar with, the reasoning faculty. How to find gold, how to find the soul. And then, with that, the process of devotional service will follow. That's what he's advocating. And they're into it. They Prahlad is a hero. So when he's done with all this, they're ready, devotional service. Let's have kirtan. And they get up and have kirtan. Till Sunda and Mark come in the classroom. Okay. Any discussion? Yes.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj. So this neti process, basically you are trying to find out what something is by defining what it is not.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
I was just wondering, is this similar or is it the same as understanding the tatastha lakshana of something? Because
explain how you asking. I'm not sure what you're asking.
Like when we for the Anya Bilashita Shunyam verse, the Swarup Lakshana, from what I understand, is that which devotional service is, and then the Tatastha Lakshana is that which
similar.
It is not.
Yes, similar, very similar. It's not this, it's not this.
Yeah.
So if it's not this and not this, what's left? Like, what do you guys do for fun? Kind of thing. What do you do? If you don't do this and you don't do that, what do you do? Yeah. Something? Yes. Yes.
Hare Krishna. I was wondering, well, you said that the soul, even before it gets a body, is contaminated. So I was wondering if the subtle body stays with the soul for some time.
If the subtle body does what?
Stays with the soul even after it leaves
Yes.
the gross body.
Yes.
Okay.
Here's how it works. The living entities will go back to, there's the unmanifest state. We discussed this yesterday or day before, whenever, some previous day. There's pradhan. I think we did it yesterday. Were you here yesterday? Okay. There's this cloud of the material energy that's totality of the material energy, but it's not separated out into the different elements. Like a big jumbled warehouse and everything's all mixed up. But the totality of the material energy, all of it, that's called pradhan, undifferentiated, sum total of the material energy, like a cloud. Mahavishnu, you know Mahavishnu, he sees that energy and he wants to give that energy some opportunity for service. It's actually a person. It's his shadow energy, Chaya Devi. So he glances. That's all he does. With a desire, a compassionate desire, she wants something service to do. So the desire and the glance. Mahavishnu has internal potency. Sometimes, like there's Srimati Radharani, she's manifested next to Krishna, Kishori and Kishore. They look like two forms, but one entity, according to our Vaishnava teachings. You with me? Energy and energetic, they're one entity, but manifested in two forms. In the case of Mahavishnu, same, but she's within. And he's enjoying pastimes with her within, called Yoga Nidra. You've heard that before? Yoga Nidra? Mystic slumber. Nidra means sleep. And Yoga Nidra is not like we sleep. It's his eyes are slightly open, but he appears to be asleep, but he's not asleep. He's enjoying pastimes, eternal pastimes with Rama Devi within. She senses his desire. She's intimately connected with him. She's his internal potency. She knows what he wants because she's intimately. So he desires that this shadow energy has some service. So what does she do? She serves him. She gathers those living entities. The sum total of all living entities are then entrusted to the glance of Mahavishnu, and the living entities are carried by the glance of Mahavishnu to this cloud. Pradhan, it's called in Sanskrit. Along with the living entities goes time energy. She has subpotencies, and one of them is eternal time. She can transform that eternal time into time as we know it, so she does. So that time energy goes with the living entities, and it contacts this pradhan. It's like impregnation. The womb of the mother becomes agitated by the seeds of the father. Those seeds are the living entities and time energy. With me so far? Okay. And then this undifferentiated cloud starts to differentiate. Elements start to separate out. The first one that separates out, our dear friend, false ego. So there's the living entity. There's the time energy, because you need time for activity. Karma is dormant because time energy has been withdrawn. Now time energy is injected, karma gets activated. And the modes of nature, familiar with the modes of nature, they were dormant. Now they become agitated by the time energy and the living entities. And then all the 24 elements, one by one, becomes manifest. We discussed this yesterday, right? False ego in contact with the mode of goodness separates out the material mind. With me? False ego and the material mind. So far we have two. We're going to get up to 24. false ego in contact with the mode of passion separates out material intelligence. Now we have three. Now there's different ways that this is described. I just read yesterday from Jiva Goswami that the five knowledge acquiring senses, sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell, and the instruments of those senses manifest from that. Because knowledge, the intelligence, knowledge acquiring senses, and then the working senses. So that's 10 plus 3, that's 13. And then comes false ego in contact with ignorance, the 5 gross elements. That's the gross body, right? Earth, water, fire, or ether. And then the objects of the senses, that's another 5. So 5, the objects of the senses, plus the 5 material elements, that's 10, plus knowledge acquiring senses and working senses, that's another 10, that's 20. Now we have mind, intelligence, and false ego, that's 23. We discussed this yesterday. And then there's a 24 is contaminated consciousness. You can listen to yesterday's class to hear some discussion about that one. There's 24. Now there's a living entity and there's 24 elements. There's no bodies yet. The bodies are assembled by the controlling deities of those elements. They're manifested also. These are the primordial ones, because there's no universe yet. There's no bodies yet. It's a little abstract, but it's prototype demigods. But they know what they have some service to do, but they can't do it yet. Anyway, some more things happen. They pray to Vishnu, help. So he helps. And then the universes are created, and then they form bodies. So now there's a living entity that gets a body. Now back to your question. There's a subtle and gross body. Each soul gets one. Because we wanted to enjoy separately from Krishna. That's the function of creation, enjoying separately from Krishna. It's not possible. You can't enjoy separately. But we get this illusory thing going on that we think we're like a movie. We think we can enjoy separately. So we get one. Gross and subtle body. Now, to your question. After some time, the gross body breaks down. It's kaput. It's no longer functionable. So now what happens? Which is what your question is. The gross body is left behind. The subtle body carries the soul to the next situation. And what's the determining factor? What the mind is fixed upon at the time of death, Bhagavad Gita, that state the soul will attain without fail. So what determines what the mind is fixed upon at the time of death? 2 main things, guna and karma. You know the meaning. Modes of nature and our prior activity. The prior activity is what the free will choices that we've made in the course of a particular lifetime that generates karma. And there may be some residual karma from previous lifetimes as you keep going on and on. So the gross body is given up, the subtle body stays with the soul for this whole journey in material existence. Mind, intelligence, and false ego. And within the mind, there's massive, better than anything Bill Gates ever figured out about storing information. Very subtle filing system. All those impressions are stored in the mind. And time energy makes some of them manifest. Tick-tock, tick-tock. And then the impression comes in the form of an impetus to do something or to enjoy something, or like a rerun. You with me? Okay. So we need a mind. If you're going to have material happiness, you got to have a mind. You need material intelligence to make a plan how to fulfill those desires that are within the mind. And you need a false ego, so you can forget who you really are and try to be the enjoyer of material nature, like as if you're Krishna or something. That's the subtle body. It stays with the soul as long as we're in the material world. Now let's go back to this. Neti is, well, that's not me. There's the gross body. I'm not the arm, not the head, not the elbow. Now what about, the activities of the mind? That desire. That's not me either. And the material intelligence is not me either. And that, our dear friend false ego, that's not me either. So it takes very strong power of analysis to even hit a home run, to get it right. I'm not the mind. But the tendency is, well, really I'm the mind. I'm so familiar with that territory, even though I know I'm not the mind, I think I'm the mind, and I just sail on. It's insufficient. But back to your question, the subtle body carries the soul to its next situation. Once you get one, it's really hard to get rid of it. And there's a whole setup, karma and the modes of nature, to keep us in jail. And even if you're good, you can't get out of jail. Because activities of goodness give you another body. And with the subtle body, you got a better grade. You get a, first-class prison cell. So what's the solution to that? That's what Bhagavad Gita is all about. What's the solution to that? That's what Prahlad is saying here to his friends. There's a solution. It's devotional service. But, for starters, try to understand who you're not. And by inference, negative inference, you can understand who you are. Now what are you going to do? Devotional service to Krishna. Is that all right? Transcendental knowledge leads to detachment. And with that knowledge and detachment, then there's this pause space, mode of goodness space, where you can consider, what should I be doing now that I know that I'm not this body? Even the thought and the desire of being an enjoyer is really strong tendency to be the enjoyer. What's the alternative? I want to be happy. What am I supposed to do? Go out of existence? Some people reach that conclusion. Buddhists reach that conclusion. If you really go down into it, that's what Buddhism says, just go out of existence. In fact, you don't exist. Just this morning I was reading from Tattva Sandarbha some of Jiva Goswami's commentary from Tattva Sandarbha, from his Sarva Sambhadani, on this notion that some brand of Buddhists say about Atma. And, it's very curious. You don't exist. And they argue against positive existence. There's a brand, a group of Buddhists. You can't have a positive existence because blah blah. And Jiva Goswami, addresses it, confronts it. And that's what, because the spirit soul can't exist, therefore ultimately nothingness. It's fallacious logic. And he refutes the fallacious logic by stronger logic, but ultimately it's shabda, it's sound vibration. Yeah. Microphone.
I wanted a clarification on the like the setup of the chitta, the subtle body, like the structure of the chitta, the subtle body. I've heard it described that the intelligence is closest to the soul, and then I also hear sometimes that the false ego is the most subtle.
False ego is more subtle, yeah.
But I've also heard it described that the intelligence is more subtle, depending on, I guess, where you're coming from.
That let me, I'm not sure I'm understanding. Are you saying that intelligence is next to the soul, therefore it seems like it's more subtle than false ego? The logic would be, since it's next to the soul, it's more subtle than false ego?
Yeah, and also, I mean, I guess, this is just coming from, I was reading, a devotee wrote a book on the Yoga Sutras. And
A devotee what?
A devotee translated the Yoga Sutras, and I guess it could be just for that particular school that they view
I got about 50% of this last part. I'm sorry. I'm remember that I'm half
deaf.
deaf.
Farther away. A little closer. All right.
You're articulate. I just can't understand because my hearing is bad.
So, anyways, I was reading the Yoga Sutras by Edwin Brandt, and
You were reading Yoga Sutras.
Yeah, and he describes the chitta as first the mind, then the false ego, then the intelligence. And his argument is because everything filters through your intelligence, which determines your ego.
Because the intelligence is closer to the self than ego.
And yeah, I've also heard it in our books as well that the intelligence is like the wife of the self, like it's the closest thing.
Intelligence is like what?
The intelligence is like the wife.
Like the wife.
Of the soul.
Of the soul. Okay. Well, there's somebody even closer than the wife to the soul. And that's the sense of who I am. And the sense of who I am is the springboard of intelligence. The wife. The metaphor fits from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching, from the first verse of Shikshastakam. Vidya vadhu jivanam. Vadhu means wife. So the Sankirtan, the congregational chanting of the holy name, as one progresses, acts like the wife. It means it awakens buddhi. But buddhi is spiritual intelligence, not the other kind. The other kind is born of the material energy. It's a material element, right? And more subtle than the intelligence is false ego. In fact, it precludes, even before there's a wife, there's a sense of false ego. And then one accepts a wife. It's something like this. It's very similar to the Narada's discussion with King Prachini Bari, where he describes this allegorical king, Paranjana, and everything's great except he wants a wife. And the wife represents material intelligence, because in order to be an enjoyer, you need material intelligence. But before there's the wife, there's the sense of, I want to be the enjoyer. It's more subtle. So material intelligence is like the wife, no problem. And the wife is very dear to the husband. The queen was very dear to King Paranjan. And then he became attached to her, and when he died, he took birth as a woman. And so there's still false ego, and then there's the circumstances change. Okay? I hope everybody understood that little exchange. Not exactly. He'll explain to you afterwards. Go ahead, Radha Krishna.
Thank you so very much, Maharaj. A question that I always had, now it reminded me after his question, was about the description of hellish planets in Bhagavatam. It seemed to me that the spirit soul experiences the hellish planets through its subtle body. The subtle body is dragged by Yamadutas to hell. I don't know if there he gets a gross body or not. And then the related question would be those like other like 8,400,000 life forms, they are not considered as hellish lives. Or the parallel question would be why the experience of the heavenly planets is not like experienced by just subtle body. Do we have gross bodies in heavenly planets?
Translation? No, it's not the soul is generally taken to the hellish planets. If one goes to the hellish planets, it's the subtle body that's taking the soul there. But it's the subtle body that also carries the soul to the heavenly planets. Or, again, to a human form of life. Subtle body carries the soul, just like his question. The subtle body carries the soul. Hellish planets, upper planets, same planet. While in the, this is my understanding, which means I'm open for a clearer and better understanding. But my understanding is the hellish planets are subtle in the sense that the duration of time feels like when you're in a dream. A whole bunch of time passes and it's just a flash, just moments. So the experience is a genuine experience of those different kinds of sufferings that you read about in the 5th canto Bhagavatam. And the suffering in that condition is so severe. The living entity pleads, get me out of this condition. You'll have to take birth as an insect. Yes, get me out of this condition. And then is transferred to whatever that lower life form is. The hellish experience comes before the lower life form, the gross body form. So this is my understanding. It's subtle experience. The gross body is not there, the subtle body. That's like, the description of being thrown off a cliff and then gathered up and thrown off a cliff and thrown off a cliff again and again. Or put in a vat of boiling oil and cooked, and then put back again in a vat, and like again and again, like may happen in a dream, like a rerun of a bad dream. It just keeps happening again and again, and it's the pain is it's being pierced by lances and all kinds of. It's subtle, because gross bodies would be kaput with those things. But in the subtle body, you don't die. You just undergo the misery again and again. But something like some persons, it is reported. I'm repeating a report. Some persons have their limbs amputated from gangrene or whatever it is, and so the limb is gone. And after the amputation, they still feel pain of the limb that's no longer there. The pain they feel is in the mind. It's not physical pain anymore, not gross physical pain. It's subtle pain. They feel it. Pain is in the mind. Although you can measure pain from, neurological events. But it's just neurological event. That's not pain, it's the perception of the neurological event. It's in the mind. And happiness is within the mind. Sukha and dukkha is within the mind. And then one gets a gross body. So it can be a heavenly or a lower life form. But before that is the hellish planet. He wants the microphone again.
You just mentioned. I want to more clarification right after the sentence that you said. But to quantify my question, the good karma and the bad karma do not neutralize each other. So for bad karma, the living entity experiences that subtle form of hell. And then for the good karma, does the living entity experience the heavenly planets with, again, a subtle body, or does he gain a gross body to experience the heavenly planets?
Well, because you're entitled to a gross body. Therefore, the happiness of the heavenly experience is in the mind. You know this example of daydream, night dream? So, you familiar with that one? No. Yeah. Are you familiar with that one? Daydream, night dream? So we'll do it just quickly. At night, you may have a dream. And the dream at night may be, I'm a king, and I'm enjoying sitting on the throne and enjoying kingly opulence. It's just a dream. And then in that same dream, into the royal palace comes a tiger, and the tiger's attacking me, and I scream. Because I scream, I wake up. There was no tiger. There was no throne. It's just a dream. And that dream has no more reality than during the daytime. We're dreaming. It's within the mind. So the heavenly planet, we're within, the happiness of heavenly life is, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. It's within the mind. For a devotee, it's abominable. Why? Well, unless there's service to Krishna, then if there's service to Krishna, I don't mind this or that. But when you don't have that bhakti principle activated, then it's happiness and distress, pleasure and pain, honor, dishonor, hot and cold. The advice, chapter 2, is you tolerate it. Because it's not really what happiness and distress is anyway. This neti. So what is happiness? Happiness is being engaged in Krishna's loving service. Well, I don't have very much love. Okay, well, develop that love. How? Bhakti process, sadhana bhakti. Okay, I think we'll let anyone else want to have a point to make over here? Over here. It's 8:48. This will be our last question.
One time this topic was brought up in a class, and Mukunda said, I sometimes have an issue with this type of discussion, how you're not the body, because my mind wants to think, what's the positive approach? I'm not this. So then, in other words, the practical application, Prabhupada really emphasizes you're not the body. It's such a powerful message. But, in a practical field, how does one, the example may come up like Arjuna on the battlefield. So he's out there, he's firing arrows, he's a warrior, he's fighting. Is he's somehow conscious, okay, I'm not this body, and he's seeing it all from a detached perspective? Or is he right there in the midst of it? So the practical application of this is a little confusing. I mean, does this mean one is it seems like it would be difficult to be going around your day knowing full well I'm not this body when I have to interact in so many complicated situations.
I've noticed. Therefore, the positive is not just aham brahmasmi, but das anudas. I'm Krishna's servant. So go back to Arjuna on the battlefield. So that before the battlefield, a Kshatriya. Now, for you and for me, we're not Kshatriyas, and getting smashed by an opponent, you reel. It's like, wow. But for a Kshatriya, they like. That's happiness. Just like for a Brahmana, the austerity, just like, the austerity of fasting all day on Janmashtami and fasting half a day on Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja and, take a deep breath, the next day is Ekadasi. But Brahmanas like that. Brahmanas like that. Austerity is something Brahmanas like, not something that, yuck, oh no, it's Janmashtami, I've got to fast. So, besides the happiness of the Brahmana and the happiness of the Kshatriya, higher than that is devotional service. When the arrows are coming at Arjuna, he's not even paying attention to the wounds. He's so absorbed in devotion to Krishna. It's inconsequential. He's a hero. So he can take the wounds. But more than that, not only he can defeat those who are able to wound him, he's in devotion to Krishna. That's the strength that carries one beyond, I'm not this body. It's the positive, exactly as you said. That's who I'm not. Now who am I? Well, I'm spirit soul. That's neutral. What's spirit soul? It's not this. That's what it is. Definition by negation. So what's the positive? It's like the happiness of Brahmananda is compared to the water in the hoofprint of calf to a whole ocean of bhakti rasa. It's the strength of bhakti. It's the positive. So if you're a Kshatriya, take arrows, no problem. If you're a Brahmana, you engage in austerities. As a Vaishnava, it's whatever your varna may be. Not just you make it as an offering to Krishna, it supersedes altogether. You act as is appropriate for your position, but superlative. And the primary overwhelming mood is the mood of devotion to Krishna. It's such a wonderful, the philosophy is certainly wonderful. What to speak of the experience, the realization of the philosophy. Jnanam vijnanam astikyam. Brahma karma swabhavajam. Okay, we're going to end there. Srila Prabhupada.